All right, so this is the first Incus Q&A live stream, so that's going to be a bit new. First thing first, for anyone who's been asking about the cat, here is the cat. He was just in front of my office as this was starting, so he's about to try to murder me now, but anyway, he hasn't been on one of those YouTube videos in a while, so I figured I would bring him for this. And the cat is now on the pillow. We'll see if it's gonna stay there. Cool. So yeah, as mentioned, this is the first time I do really like a Q&A on Incus. I've been piling up a few questions here and there from Twitter and Mastodon. But if you've got anything else, feel free to just leave it in the chat. I'm trying to quite actively look at it this time around. Let me actually see if I can get that to be a bit larger. Yeah, there we go. Cool, so I get to see the chat easily now. And yeah, also, obviously there's been a bit of activity going on around LXD and Incus yesterday. That wasn't really, well, I didn't know that this was coming. The live stream was planned already to be a Q&A. So we'll see if there are any kind of questions around any of that. But otherwise, yeah, ask questions in chat. I've got YouTube, I think, configured for as low latency as it gets. So hopefully we can have this be somewhat interactive. Just before I get to that, I just want to touch on what's coming up with Incus. So Incus 0.3 has been around, what, a couple of weeks now, something like that. We're going to be doing 0.4 next week, just before kind of the holiday break, to pick up a number of small features, bug fixes, and kind of anything that's pending in there. It should be mostly uneventful, and yeah, it's going to be releasing probably Thursday, Friday next week is kind of my goal, just before the holidays. So people who want to just play with Incus can play with the latest thing over the break. For anyone who's running it in production, they can just wait till after the break to update their system to the new release. All right. So the first question we've got here from the chat is around using Incus in a hybrid cloud setup. So yeah, that's something you can totally do. You can run Incus kind of bare metal on-prem, get yourself either like standalone systems or an Incus cluster that way. And once you've got that up and running, then you can also run Incus kind of on standalone cloud instances, and you can then move instances kind of back and forth between the two. They don't need to have any kind of relationship. You actually don't want to cluster across having part of your cluster be in the cloud and part of your cluster be local. That's a bad idea. You're gonna have a bunch of network issues doing that. But having either multiple standalone clusters or even a set of independent, like just single systems that run Incus, and then you can go ahead and move things back and forth. If you've never used that, Incus lets you add, in the CLI tool, lets you add a number of different servers. So you can do Incus remote add, and then you add a number of different servers. You can list their instances, you can interact with them, and you can copy or move instances back and forth between those. I can just give you a quick look at kind of how that looks like. So yeah, if we go look at this here, I've got a number of remotes that are defined in my client. So this is for NorthSec, which I don't have access to right now. I don't have the VPN up, but then I've got, that's my laptop, that's my desktop here, that's a data center cluster, that's my home cluster, and that's my partner's laptop. And so I can totally go and look at, say, what's in the demo project on my local cluster. I can see there's an instance there. I can look at what I've got running locally, and I could, let's see if that works with the cluster back and say start a new instance 2204, call it U1 in this case. So this is now running on my desktop here. We can see it's running with IPv4, IPv6 addresses. And so what you can do now is you stop it, and do move U1, want to move that over to the demo project on my home cluster. There we go. That was pretty quick, actually. I guess that instance was quite small. And if I go look on my on that cluster, there should be. Okay, where did that go? Target project demo, move U1. Huh. Was there an issue with the target project? No. That's actually interesting. Did I just hit a bug? What did it do? Instance not found. Okay, so it shows it's not found locally. Did it go? I think I might have a demo project locally too. I do. Okay. Did it just go in that one instead? Okay. We're gonna have to look at that. There's like a CLI bug clearly there, looks like, or me not using it correctly. Either way is possible. Okay, so let's look. This is my local project called demo, and now I want to move from U1. Let's be precise, from local to my home cluster. Target project is demo. Okay, it's still here. What the hell? That's weird. I know there's some logic that was added recently to improve copies and migrations like that. I wonder if it's being stupid because of the target project here confusing it. So you know what? Let's ignore that mess, and I'm gonna have to look into that obviously, but okay, so it shows that the remote cluster here is on the demo project. You can actually make sure of that by looking at this. So in theory, if I just move without specifying a target projects, if I just do this, now this time it should ignore. Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Can I write about it? This is funny. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so that's another bug. Let me see what just happened. Yeah, okay. You know what? Let's do the opposite way. This one. This way it should actually work. And I can go into a tiny bit more detail as to why this just blew up in my face. That remote cluster I'm dealing with, the one at home, it's using OpenFGA, which is the new fine-grained access control. So it's doing OpenID Connect with a central authentication server, and then fine-grained access controls through a separate authorization server. And what's going on here is that I was interacting with the cluster, and some of the requests were hitting conflicts on authorization rules. So I need to look into that. That should not have happened. I mean, either of those bugs should not have happened. And we normally have test suite coverage for those. I'm kind of confused as to what's going on. But anyways, if I do it the other way around, that should work much better. So if we start the instance on the cluster, okay, so yeah, it is hitting the same issue with the permission stuff. Okay, so let's just use a different name that might work around that problem. Effectively, what it's saying is that the authorization server already has a demo/u1 instance recorded for some reason, and that's causing a conflict. So I'm just using a different name now. So I launched it as foo. If we go look at the remote server, we should see it there. Foo is running. Now let's stop it on the remote cluster. So it's effectively equivalent of like either your on-site cluster or your cloud instance, whichever. And then from there, you would say, I want to move this stuff. So foo remotely, please move it to local. And in this direction, hopefully it behaves because there's no weird access control stuff on my local system. And we see it's effectively streaming that instance now over the network. Not super fast, but still. I'm on Wi-Fi, so it's just pulling it from that local cluster onto my local system. There we go. It's done. So at this point, it should be gone from the remote cluster. It is. And it's now available locally. I can start it back up here, and it's starting up with a local IP address. So that's effectively how that should have worked from the start. I should put up the demo the other way around to avoid any kind of weirdness. The couple of issues I just hit, I'm actually going to make a quick note here. Target project not working with remotes during move. So that was a weird one I'll be looking at. And the second one was OpenFGA conflict during instance move, during remote instance move. Okay. So I've got notes for that. I'm going to look at those after the live stream to see what's going on, make sure we've got fixes and tests to cover those. But anyway, that's how that's supposed to work. You can move instances back and forth between different Incus or even LXD systems. Right now, the API is not that different, that you can actually mix and match to an extent if you need to, which is one of the ways you can deal with some of the migrations. So that's kind of the idea. You can run either like standalone or clustered Incus in both the cloud and on your local system. You can add both of them to the command line client or to any API tool that you're using. And then you can move instances back and forth kind of whichever way you want. All right. So there's a question around a lot of projects have been changing their license. Terraform is a good example. Have you been following the broader topic? Yeah, I've been kind of keeping an eye on some of that, and it's kind of odd. Like, I guess it makes sense from maybe like a corporate point of view of like, oh, like we don't want, you know, people to make money out of our thing. Let's try and lock things down. But in both cases, whether we're talking about Terraform or we're talking about LXD, it doesn't actually work that way. The project was open source under like a pretty unrestricted license like Apache 2. So someone can just go ahead and fork it. And that's exactly what happened with Terraform. I mean, we've got OpenTofu now under the Linux Foundation, which is a fork with even more contributors than Terraform had in the past. So that's how that turned out. And in the LXD case, well, we actually had Incus be created even before the licensing change, but same thing, like Incus can just keep moving, will still be Apache 2, and well, it's sad that we can't easily go and include changes from LXD into Incus anymore. It doesn't really affect us other than that. And yeah, it seems to be a bit of a pattern at this point. I mean, Red Hat has also been pulling some interesting tricks lately to try and enforce their users to go through their paid services, their paid support. So it seems to be a bit of a cash grab in many cases right now. Which is not something I particularly enjoy seeing. Like, I think there are ways to make a living out of open source, which does not need any of those kind of tricks. It really feels like those tricks are being pulled to satisfy like shareholders and try to get as much profit as possible out of this at the cost of the community, which is quite unfortunate to see. All right, so there's a question around what about the third-party compatibility with for Incus, things like Ansible and kind of the state of the API as far as like LXD and Incus. So as I just mentioned, the API is currently very, very similar. So you can use the LXD client to drive a standard Incus deployment. So if you just use like TLS certificate-based authentication, or if you just run it locally through the Unix socket, that should work just fine. The OpenID Connect and OpenFGA integration is not the same. So if you are using OIDC with LXD or with Incus, you can't mix and match those clients. It's not going to work. So there's that issue where you start having to switch over. Now, the good thing is that in many cases, whenever you need to like deal with those kinds of integrations, modifying the integration to actually use the Incus client instead of the LXD client is quite trivial. That's actually what I'm currently doing for Ansible. So if I go on my own Ansible server, I actually have here in plugins, connection, I've got an incus.py connection plugin, which is just a copy of the LXD one with all of the mention of the LXC command line tool replaced with Incus, and that just works. So that's a thing you can do pretty easily in many cases. In the case of Ansible specifically, I do have a request open. Let me look if I can find it easily. Yeah. So there's that issue that's been filed back in October, which asks about adding support for Incus as a connection plugin. I provided a few options as far as what can be done to make this work nicely, but nobody ever answered. So I think, so effectively what I did locally is the copy paste and modify a bit, which is the first option and kind of the easiest one. Given that nobody responded to this, I think I'm going to send a pull request to just push the plugin I've got locally to the community repo and see if we can just get that in. Like, I'm not a Python developer. I don't write Ansible plugins or anything, but I just took the existing LXD one. I replaced everything from LXD to Incus in there. And I did a tiny improvement by just passing an extra -- quiet flag to the file command that was called from inside there. It's very, very simple. So I'll try and send that one to upstream, and hopefully we can get that in. Terraform is a bit of a weirder one because it was a community-run project, but these days the maintainers are all Canonical employees. So if we go look at Terraform LXD, you can see that the two maintainers here are Din Muchek and Simon Deziel. Both of them are Canonical employees on the LXD team. So I don't see this particular provider supporting both LXD and Incus at the same time. Also because of a bit of a licensing mess that I can touch on in a few minutes. So I suspect what will need to happen is someone needs to create a Terraform Incus provider for Terraform by just forking this repo and replacing things with Incus. If they do that, they should make sure to do it sooner rather than later, or be careful as to what they fork. That's because of the whole licensing mess I kind of touched on. So for anyone who didn't read that yet, LXD has been effectively relicensed to a GPL v3 as of yesterday. Exact details of like whether they've done it right or not, that's very debatable. I'm definitely on the they've not done it right, but anyways. The impact of that is now anything that any Go package that imports the LXD client, when they next refresh their Go modules, they're going to be pulling the AGPL version of the LXD codebase. The AGPL, just like the GPL license, is effectively viral in that if you include code from an AGPL source into your source repository, the only license you can now release it under effectively is going to be the AGPL. So if you have existing downstreams, like existing code bases written in Go that currently import the LXD client package or any of the LXD Go packages, you need to be extremely careful. Either you need to pin your dependencies in a way that you never import anything that was released with LXD 520, or you need to switch that to Incus to avoid this particular mess. Unless you're perfectly happy with your Go package now being effectively relicensed under the AGPL license. AGPL is an extremely uncommon license in the Go ecosystem, specifically because of that issue. Like Go is mostly a statically compiled language, so any package you import effectively gets all bundled into a single code base that gets compiled. That means you don't really get to pretend that the thing is external to you. Any Go package you import effectively becomes part of your code base, and from a licensing standpoint, that can be quite problematic. The default license for a lot of Go packages tend to be Apache 2, MIT, or BSD. All of those licenses don't really have that kind of problem. But as soon as you mix in anything GPL, you're going to have issues. LGPL, so the lesser GNU public license, which is meant for libraries, doesn't quite have the same issue, especially if you add a tiny blurb into the license allowing bundling, which is what we've done for the one project that we do run, which is Go LXC, which is based on the liblxc library. So it is an LGPL project in Go. But it does have the exception saying that you are you can effectively bundle the thing within a code base of a different license and you're fine. There is no such provision in the new license for LXD. So yeah, anyone using those kind of packages in their own code should be extremely careful. Either take the safe route and just use the Incus one instead, or pin the old version of the LXD package, or I guess talk to an attorney and figure out what that actually means for you and whether you should relicense or what the actual implications are. So that's a bit of an issue there. Other question. So there is a question around Microsoft and Incus. So for Ceph support, Incus works exactly the same way as LXD does. And in the case of Microsoft, it's not going to be as magical in that it won't automatically get the right ceph.conf and Ceph client keyring and all that stuff that Microsoft provides. But you can make it work very easily. Effectively, you just need to copy your Microsoft ceph.conf to /etc/ceph on your system, and the same thing for the client admin keyring. Copy it into etc/ceph, and then you're done. At that point, Incus can talk to your Ceph cluster, and it doesn't matter whether it's a local Microsoft or it's a remote Ceph cluster or it's something you installed like in Docker containers, Kubernetes, or anything. At that point, it really doesn't matter. So that's pretty easy to get working. You effectively just need to copy 2 files and make sure you install the Ceph command package on your system, because that brings in the command line tools that Incus needs. So that's nice and easy to get working. There's also the question around adding things like Gluster to Incus. So it's not something that we're currently looking at doing, but it's also not something that we're opposed to see being done at all. So if someone really wants it and wants to either spend the time to implement it themselves and send pull requests and all that stuff to make it work, we're perfectly fine with that. Similarly, if someone wants it and would like to sponsor that particular feature, that's something that I think I'd be quite happy to do. There are a few others that we're looking at kind of maybe doing. So Gluster was mentioned before, but there's also the RBD/lin store. That's another thing that we've seen some requests for. And it's also, what's the other one? Yeah, we're also looking at doing something we call clustered LVM. So there's a not super well used extension to LVM that allows for a shared block to be used across multiple servers, and letting you create logical volumes on top of that shared block. That's quite important for anyone who's dealing with things like Fiber Channel or similar storage, which provides a LUN, the identical same LUN, so the same block device across multiple servers. If you want that to work with Incus, then we need support for that. And the component was implemented for LVM. It's effectively a way to handle locking, so that whenever a new logical volume is created, there's no risk of the same blocks being used by something else at the same time. So it just creates a dedicated lock region within the block. It's the block device itself that's just used to coordinate locking across multiple systems. From the research that I've done, this should work perfectly fine, and it's something we're also looking at adding kind of in the near future. Some of those things I still need to file just issues so that people can look at that. But if we go look at what we have right now, you'll see that we already have a decent series here of open issues. A bunch of them are marked as easy, which doesn't always mean that they're actually easy to work on. It mostly means that they're pretty well understood and that mentoring is available. So if someone wants to take them, then we're going to be able to provide a bunch of details and make sure that they've got a good experience contributing to Incus. So that's kind of where things are. I'm going to be adding a few more things here and there as I think of them, because it's good to have a list for people to look at, have an idea of what might be coming up in the future, and be able to contribute to that. All right, I think that's already the end of the questions so far. I don't know if anyone else on the stream has any other questions to cover here. Otherwise, what can I go and ramble about for a bit? So as mentioned, Incus 04 will be out next week. I just noticed that there's a check that failed on the last thing we merged. That is new, huh? That's interesting. That particular stuff didn't used to fail, so I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on. I suspect there's a change to the CI tool itself that's not causing us some problems. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that one. I was hoping it was just a transient test failure and we could just retry it and have it be fixed, but it doesn't look that way. It definitely looks like we are tripping a new test inside of Golang CI. So I mean, I'll retry it just for the hell of it, but I don't think that's gonna be helping out. All right, so back to code here, and Kubernetes and Incus. So my usual point of view on that is there are two different things. Incus is really kind of lower level infrastructure. It provides you stateful, long-running instances, whether they're containers or virtual machines, and it's not like you can use it for very short-lived instances, but that's not really what it's designed to do primarily. Whereas Kubernetes has a lot of kind of magic scheduling, APIs, plugins. It's got a lot of stuff going on for it these days to really deploy those kind of completely stateless, microservice, ultra scalable type workloads. Generally, the way we think of it is Kubernetes, especially given its security model, is not really something I would ever recommend to run on bare metal. So you should either you should run Kubernetes on top of cloud instances, which is what many people do, or if you're going to be running it on site, you should be using something like Incus on your bare metal machines to create virtual machines for the kubelet runners. Potentially create containers for some of the infrastructure stuff that doesn't need to be run inside of virtual machines, and use that as a way to run multiple clusters, control kind of the big bulk allocation of resources across your systems, and then run K8s within those virtual machines. That makes it much easier to run a variety of different Kubernetes clusters. It makes it a lot easier to also switch to newer versions of Kubernetes and provide clusters to whoever you want within your organization without the fear of that stuff running directly on bare metal with all of the security implications that come with it. One of the issues I kind of have with Kubernetes, but also with just about anything else really, is the tendency of trying to use the one thing to do absolutely everything. Kubernetes is really good at doing those very lightweight stateless containers and all of the service meshing and integration between those, doing the scaling, doing that kind of stuff. It's good at that. Kubernetes is not designed to run long-running stateful workloads. So anyone using Kubernetes to run virtual machines, that seems completely wrong to me. That's the completely wrong tool for the job. And I would be scared to death that the tool is just going to decide oh, this VM doesn't really need to exist anymore and just goes and deletes it. It's not supposed to do that, obviously, but for that kind of stuff, it definitely feels like the wrong tool for the job. So instead of going with we've decided to move to K8s and let's move absolutely everything, including legacy systems, including things that really need to be full standalone stateful systems, maybe you should do what the public cloud providers have been doing, which is still provide full instances, still provide bare metal systems, still provide those when needed, and then for workloads that benefit from running in a Kubernetes environment, then create clusters whenever those make sense, and then grant access to whoever needs access to those clusters to deploy their workloads. I think that's usually the much better approach there, and really is using the right tool for the job. Don't abuse Incus to run stuff that should be run on K8s, but similarly don't abuse K8s to run things like virtual machines or long-running workloads. It's really not designed for that. So I think that would be the Kubernetes side of things. Otherwise, we'll see if other questions show up. But I guess I can go ramble a bit on what happened yesterday. So for anyone who didn't look too closely, what happened is, so as mentioned, LXD switched over to the GPL license. It's a bit of a problem because it looks like they did a full relicense despite not actually owning the copyright on anything that was contributed by the community under Apache 2. The GPL license allows, the Apache license allows for that code to be included in a combined work as a GPL. That's fine, but that's different from allowing relicensing. So there's some issues there where at the very least, the LXD repo needs to be changed to include the Apache 2 license and to make it clear what actually is Apache 2 and what actually is a GPL v3 within that repository. It's currently not true, and I think that means that the release of LXD 520 is in a very weird situation because the licensing information within that release and that release tarball is effectively a lie. So that will need addressing. On top of that, Canonical also introduced the Canonical CLA. So for anyone who's not familiar, this is the Canonical contributing license agreement, which requires anyone contributing now to LXD to grant a perpetual license to their code to Canonical, which allows Canonical to then relicense, sublicense, or use the code in whichever way they see fit. So you don't lose your own copyright. So that's one thing to make clear, like you're still the owner of that code, but you effectively give the exact same rights to Canonical to do whatever they want. They can use that code, they can change the license on it, they can include it in any closed source project they might be working on. They can include that code in any behind closed door fork of the project they might do for a given company, all that kind of stuff. Also, one thing that's probably worth pointing out with CLAs, and the reason why I tend to be quite against them, is, I mean, not only do you give away a lot of your rights, or at least give a copy of your rights to someone else with no control on what they will do with it, but also, in many cases, you're not allowed to do that. Like, anyone who's employed will generally not be able to sign that CLA. They need their employer to go and sign the CLA on their behalf, because the code you write during your work time, you traditionally, unless you've got, I mean, depends on jurisdiction, depends on your contract, but for most people, that code does not belong to you, it belongs to your employer, which means you can't go and then contribute to projects that have CLAs because you're not, like individually, you're not allowed to sign this thing. You need your employer's legal team to do that. And that is like the biggest way to prevent any kind of drive-by quick fixes, nice improvements, bug fixes, that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, we could see it pretty easily with the LXD repository already. Prior to the CLA being introduced, it had contributions from, I think it was like 300-ish contributors. Let me check. So I'm gonna go in the LXD repo. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not looking at, I'm gonna look at pre-CLA. So that's 519, which is still Apache 2. And we're gonna go and do a very quick check for the author. Okay, so we're gonna be sorting that and making it unique. And then we're gonna be excluding anything that's got at canonical.com. Okay. There are still some duplicates here, most likely because of people using multiple email addresses. So to account for that, let's go ahead and remove anything after the email address field, and then sort that and make it unique again. So just going by individual contributors' names, effectively, for anyone who didn't use a canonical email address. And we're looking at 331 people who contributed stuff. What's worth noting there is that the vast majority of those people will only have contributed 1 or 2 commits at most. Like, it is like, will they actually go through the canonical CLA form? Like, it's, I don't know, I cannot dial it. Let's see if we can easily find that page again. Yeah, so it's here under legal. So what you need to do is go contributor agreement. You will need to go sign the contributor agreement here. And then you've got 2 options. You can sign it as an individual contributor, which you can only do if you're not contributing during your work time and there is no kind of contractual obligation or anything. That means the code you write, even during your spare time, might belong to your company. That can be a bit foreign for folks, I guess, in Europe and other jurisdiction, but it's not uncommon in North America that the stuff you write during your spare time still does not belong to you. So you need to be quite careful with that. and effectively pick whichever one it is of the two contracts. Then you need to read this stuff. Then you need to fill in all of those details. You need to send it through. And then it's not automatic. Like last time I saw, this actually ends up going to Canonical Legal, which then takes maybe a day or so to put your GitHub username onto a list of people who signed. And at that point, the CLA check can be retried on the pull request and can actually merge the thing. So you're looking at least another day or so for new contributors. The other problem with this is there is no way to limit what it applies to. If you sign this thing, you've just signed it for the entirety of the Canonical projects. They can now include your code in any of their projects. You can't say, okay, I'm willing to sign this thing, but only for my contributions going to LXD. There's no way to do that. So yeah, that's effectively what you're looking at now. I think it's going to seriously impact the ability for random drive-by fixes. Not to mention the other piece of it, which is the AGPL license, is also on the list of licenses that is not allowed for both consumption and contribution in a lot of large companies. That might not really matter to some, but it does mean that you won't get contributions from things like Google, Facebook, and a bunch of other of those big companies that do, for one reason or another, they do employ a lot of open source contributors. So you're not going to be able to get anything from those guys anymore. So that is a bit of a problem. And the CLA obviously is another issue because many people just flat out refuse to sign any of those. In my case, I don't strictly oppose all CLAs. I definitely do oppose CLAs that that are corporate CLAs, like the Canonical one. If it's the CLA of a true non-profit open source foundation with good reasons for wanting the ability to, say, relicense the code down the line, and the CLA is written in a way that effectively only allows them to do that, then I might be inclined to agree to those terms. But something like Canonical, no, that's not okay. So anyway, that's a bit of the background there. So it's now AGPL, it's now got a CLA. All new contributions effectively need to agree to that or things don't go in. The impact for us as Incus is that we are not going to be changing our license. We're going to stay on Apache 2, but that means now we can't go and look at anything happening in LXD. So we can't really go look at any of the new code there. We can't go and include their bug fixes or new features because all of that code is going to be AGPL moving forward. So we just can't do any of that. The thing we still need to do now is make sure that they don't do the other way around. Like they do have guidelines now saying that they will only include code that's Apache 2 and that's under the CLA. Neither of those things are true for any of the changes we do in Incus. So we're going to have to make sure that our bug fixes and our new features don't find their way into LXD, because that might, or at least don't illegally find their way into LXD, let's put it that way. So that means that on our side now, the tooling we've been using in the past to monitor and backport changes from LXD, and I can show you an example of the last one that was run yesterday, this one. So we had a tool that would generate those kind of commits. It was getting all of the bug fixes from LXD into Incus. That tool, obviously, we can't use it anymore because we can't include any further changes into Incus. But we're going to be using the same code base now to monitor the LXD repository to make sure that none of our code finds its way into LXD. It's really all a massive waste of time for everyone involved. It's kind of ridiculous that now those two projects need to make sure not to look at the other, that we can't go and interact in any ways. Despite Incus being a fork of LXD, we were still engaging with the LXD folks. We were still pointing out bugs, sending occasional pull requests, doing bug fix sessions together, doing that kind of stuff. And now all of that is going to have to stop because we can't go and look at that code and they can't go and look at ours. So that's really unfortunate. Also, Canonical doesn't really get anything out of it because since a good chunk of the code base was not AGPL to begin with, it's they don't actually get to relicense the whole thing. They end up with a weird partial mix from now and forever, effectively. So it's a weird move. The main benefit of the move, I think, for Canonical is that it messes with us. Okay, but that's really all that it is. All right, I see a bunch of people have been commenting in the chat, so let's see. Yeah, the CLA is a kind of weird way of doing open source. Yeah, it is. It's not an uncommon one. Like we've definitely, let's put it that way. It's not uncommon for companies that don't get open source to use a CLA to try to keep control while pretending to participate in the open source community. That's definitely a pattern we've been seeing in the past, and it's something that Canonical has been doing for a while, that we managed not to do with LXD when we created the project, and it's very sad to see that following my departure, like all of that stuff is going straight into the trash, and effectively everything that was good with LXD is now all being kind of ripped apart. It's really sad to see. I mean, it's a project I created 9 years ago. I don't like seeing that. I'm quite happy we've got Incus, and that all the maintainers on Incus are the original team that created LXD and made it what it is. So it's very great working with those guys, and it feels like the old days, and it's amazing. It's just sad to see things crumble on the Canonical side, honestly. So as like mentioned, like I don't know if it can help with for contributions. It's not gonna. It's definitely not gonna. As I said, like LXD had 330-ish individual contributors prior to the CLA addition. That number was like order of magnitude larger than any of the other Canonical projects that was under a CLA. I mean, we can just for the heck of it, let's go look at another project that Canonical has been running for a while, actually longer than what the hell is Juju these days? Juju, so Juju's been something that Canonical has been running for longer than LXD existed. So let's go and look at that code just to get an idea. So let's git clone Juju. And we'll do the exact same search. So look for all of the offers, remove a new one from Canonical, get a unique list out of it. And we're going to get an idea for, like, obviously it doesn't tell us how many people have, well, I mean, for those, everyone's going to have signed a CLA or be a Canonical employee in one way or the other, obviously. But that will give us an idea for just the number of contributors they've been getting. So if we look at LXD, we started the project in November 2014. So it's been around just a bit over 9 years now. I don't know that Juju was always in Git, so I'm not sure that we can do the same thing to see the age of the project. But we can see at least 2011. Okay. And now let's look at the number of contributors for this thing. 152, okay. That's honestly higher than I expected. I do see a lot of those folks being Canonical employees, looking at the name style. So I think I didn't quite get them all. One thing we could do, which is, I don't like doing that, but let's ignore the Ubuntu email addresses. Ubuntu is a problem because some of them are Canonical employees, some of them are not. So it's always a bit of a mixed bag filtering that out. So that makes us lose 3 on the LXD side. Let's see what that does to Juju. 146, so they lost 5-ish. So yeah, we're looking at less than half for a project that's been around, what was it, like 3 years longer. It's actually better than I expected, to be honest, but on there I see quite a few names that were obviously Canonical employees. I mean, myself included. I was a Canonical employee at the time. Canonical employee, Canonical employee, Canonical employee, Canonical employee, Canonical employee. So I think it's a bunch of those must have been Canonical employees that accidentally used a personal email address instead of their work email address. That makes it a bit harder to compare, but at the same time, the exact same issue is probably true on the LXD repo. So I'm not gonna, let's just say that it's less than half. it's root was in both projects. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that can happen when someone just uses Git as root in like a development system or something, and they just then pick up the commit and push it to the repo. It's odd that it didn't get picked up during review, but it can happen. In any case, it's like, we're looking at best case scenario, less than half of the contributions. That's pretty what that shows, and I would suspect it's actually worse than that, to be honest. We'll see what that does moving forward. Like, as my gut feeling is that it's going to be way worse for LXD than it's going to be for Incus. Like, it means that all of those people who would normally do drive-by improvement fixes and stuff on LXD, now they're going to have one more reason to maybe switch over to Incus and come and contribute to Incus instead. We'll see if that actually turns out to be that way. But I can definitely see it happening like that. Another thing that's interesting with the licensing change is, as you may know, LXD is included on Chromebooks as part of the Linux feature on Chromebooks. And one of the companies that has a do not consume AGPL is Google. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that change. I don't know that they would go with Incus. I don't know whether they're going to go with something else. I don't know if they're just going to be sticking to older LXD versions for the next few years. But either way, they will not be updating. I'm willing to bet they're not going to be updating the LXD version running on Chromebooks to a version that's AGPL. That is usually a big no-no at Google. And last I checked, statistics-wise, the Chromebook user base was something like 60% of the total LXD user base. So that would be a massive, massive drop in their user base just as a result of this licensing change, which is, again, quite unfortunate to see. All right, just looking at some of the other commands, finding the situation sad. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, it's just making things, harder for everyone involved. Like, we'd like it to be open source. We'd like to be able to collaborate. We'd like to be able to exchange fixes and features and, work together. And this is just building walls. Like, this is putting walls where there's really no real need for any. Other than, I don't know, Canonical feeling threatened somehow by the open source Incus fork somehow and deciding to use this as a way to get in our way and make our life worse. It's not ideal. It's really a weird move. I don't think it's gonna be, like, I don't see anything really that Canonical is gonna gain out of that. But yeah. There's a question around Chromebooks. I'm not gonna share the exact, I'm not gonna share the dashboard that I've got access to, but I can definitely answer your question as far as the Chromebook version. So Chromebooks are currently running LXD 502. My understanding is that the licensing change is gonna be in LXD 5.0. I don't know if it's been backported already. I could check that easily enough, actually. But yeah, Chromebooks are running 502. The other big user base for LXD are QNAP. So QNAP has a feature called Container Station, which relies on LXD. That also ships LXD 502. I don't have any contacts at QNAP. I don't know who's working on that or what's going on there. And I don't know whether they care about the AGPL licensing change or not. So I can't really speculate as far as whether QNAP would switch to Incus or would stop updating LXD versions, or whether they don't care and they're just gonna go with the AGPL. What I can say is that Chrome OS and QNAP combined amounts to more than 80% of the entire LXD users running on Ubuntu. Is actually quite tiny compared to those two guys combined. So they're, like, Canonicals tend to lose the vast majority of their users out of that. It's not paying users. It's potentially not users they care about, but it's users that are exposed to the technology and that might then decide to use it on their own servers and on other platforms. Like, it feels like they're losing a massive marketing tool out of this, but yeah, that's what's going on there. So there's a LXD's been developing some features such as OpenFGA that came to Incus from LXD. Would new features LXD develops not be coming to Incus because of this? Yes, that's exactly right. Though we won't be able to pull new features from LXD moving forward. One thing that's really funny about the OpenFGA case specifically is LXD developed the LXD team developed the OpenFGA integration. This was merged into LXD. Those changes were picked up by Incus. It was broken as hell. I spent an entire week fixing the hell out of it. If we go look at what I did last week. So if we look at the commits, and we look around, what is it? It's not here. Yeah, it's around here. So I fixed, not yet. It's the one page earlier. 62 Incus. Where is OpenFGA? Not there. Oh, that was longer than expected. Where is my OpenFGA stuff? So the sum of it there. And a whole bunch of them there. So OpenFGA was effectively completely non-functional. It's been merged and it would pass its tests, but it would not work at all in a cluster. It would wipe itself clean. All permissions would be dropped and everything whenever you restart LXD. It also had a bunch of other bugs as far as integration with like syncing its details. And the most hilarious of them all, if your OpenFGA server was unavailable at the time LXD started, all access would be by default allowed. So allowing a complete policy bypass by just blocking network access to the backend server. It was an absolute disaster security-wise. The funny thing is, I fixed all of those bugs. All of those bugs are now in Incus, released under Apache 2 license and no CLA. LXD has reverted the OpenFGA support from their repository. Now, when they want to reintroduce that code, they will have to do it without looking at any of the fixes that I've made. The problem is, I know full well that the engineer who's working on OpenFGA has looked at all of those fixes already. So from a legal standpoint, my understanding is that this makes that engineer tainted. That engineer can't now go and really fix things on their OpenFGA implementation because they have looked at the fixes that are under a license that's no longer compatible, that no longer complies with their contributing guidelines. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do about that, because they got themselves into a bit of a weird corner where by reverting OpenFGA and not including those fixes before they relicensed, well, now they end up with the fixes not being under the license that they want. And none of it is under a CLA, obviously. So we'll see how that turns out, but that's going to be a bit of a problem. And as I said, like we won't be able to get new features from LXD into Incus anymore. But the reverse is also true. One example, I think they haven't closed it yet, but we'll see. Actually, no, Canonical LXD, sorry. Is they had a pull request up as of yesterday, which, let's see, is it here? Is it still up? Yeah. So this is a straight up backport of a new feature from Incus. So that's a feature introduced last week in Incus to improve, to make it easier to integrate with Oven, and quite ironically to actually integrate with Micro Oven. And well, this one now, I had to comment being like, this code is all Apache 2 and from non-CLA parties, so it's therefore unsuitable for inclusion in LXD following the relicensing addition of a CLA. So that particular pull request now, they will need to close it, and if they want that feature, they're going to have to redo it from scratch on their own without looking at how it's been done in Incus. So it's really crappy as far as like situations for both people. Like I pity the engineers on the LXD team for sure. Like it's not fun to go through this, and it's also obviously annoying on our side to not be able to look at any of this stuff anymore. Like that's even gone to other things as far as like we had to post on our forum that like we're not going to be able to help LXD users out as much as we were still doing, simply because we don't want to have people start like copy pasting LXD code into forum issues or that kind of stuff, and us risking seeing some of that and then having issues. Like it's unclear that Canonical would try and actually stir some trouble around that. But who knows? And we just don't want to take the risk. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Licenses are always a bit messy. I'm not new to dealing with licensing. Part of what I was doing on the Ubuntu project for a number of years when I was still on the Ubuntu Foundations team, Ubuntu Release team, and some of those, is I was what's called an Ubuntu Archive admin. And that team is responsible for doing the review of any new package that goes into Ubuntu. And a good chunk of that review is reviewing all of the copyright information, all of the licensing interactions, all of that kind of stuff. So when I'm saying that, like, hey, the new LXD thing is going to be a bit of a headache for packagers, well, yeah, I kind of speak from experience there. It is, this current mess is not going to be super fun. On our side, the licensing is going to be very clear and very easy for anyone to work with because we've not changed it. It just means we need to pretend that LXD doesn't exist from now on to avoid any kind of issue around that. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on there. Let me see if there are any other questions there. Oh yeah, the LXD changed their logo. Yeah, well, that's because what we use as a logo for Linux containers and for Incus, which a lot of people have kind of associated as the LXD logo, has never been the LXD logo. This is like a, how did the design team call it? Like a container illustration, which we've used as kind of the informal logo for Linux containers and for all of our projects. So it was never just like LXD, but like LXCFS, LXC, all of those were using the same logo. So when they moved over to Canonical, they didn't really change logo as so much as they used the logo that Canonical had designed effectively years ago, but had never really seen adoption other than on Canonical's own website. So yeah, it's good that this has changed. It would have been extra confusing if it didn't, but that's kind of what happened there as far as the logo change and all that stuff. So yeah, I think we're going to be like, it's not really impacting my day-to-day or any of that kind of stuff. I've got a lot of features and work and stuff I'm doing on Incus, so that will keep going. I'm not aware, I mean, I've not looked, but I'm not aware of anything kind of critical as far as bug fixes or anything that I really needed from LXD that, like, oh crap, I won't be able to get anymore. There's really none of that going on there. It does mean that moving forward, anyone who finds kind of a bug on the LXD side, if they want to be nice, should go and file it on the Incus side too, so that we can also go and separately from what the LXD team does, go and fix it in Incus. That would definitely be nice, because at this point, like, the state of bug fixing in both projects is going to be diverging, which is, yeah, it's going to be a bit weird, especially because users might be running both projects and might actually have a better idea of what's going on in the other than we will. But that's what's going on there. And yes, it's going to be literally both projects potentially fixing the same bug in different ways, because we're not supposed to go look at the other one. And it gets even crazier with features, like any feature that I want to put in Incus that I know the LXD team is working for LXD, then I'm going to be working on it from scratch without looking at what they've done. So you might end up having an almost identical feature, but with different config keys, different code implementation, different slight behavioral differences and that kind of stuff, because we're not collaborating anymore. But yeah, that's what happens when you end up in that kind of licensing situation. Like, it feels ridiculous because they're both open source projects and you can go look at the code of both of them readily. But just because they're open source doesn't mean that you can freely exchange code between the two. And yeah, that's what's going to be hitting us there. Like, someone is saying that, like, Incus will be superior to LXD, and I don't know, who knows? Like, they do have more resources for sure. Like, they have 2 to 3 full-time people working on LXD itself. They have a team that's far larger than that, like in the 10 to 12 people, but some of them are going to be working primarily on documentation. A bunch of them are working on other initiatives, whether it's like microcloud or things like that. Like the core team working on LXD proper It's Tom, and I think these days it's Dan, and who else is working on that stuff? Julian. So it's those three guys. There used to be Thomas Hipp as well, who was one of the old timers on the LXD team, but he has resigned and left Canonical at the end of November. So the actual, like, as far as old timers that have a good idea of how everything works, so looking at people who've been at Canonical working on LXD itself for more than a year, at this point it's just Tom. So they've got one engineer doing that, and that's going to be a lot of extra work and complication and stuff on Tom. I really don't like seeing that being put on him, but that's what's gonna be happening there. That said, yeah, they do effectively have 3 times the resources than I do, because I'm effectively working full-time on Incus, and I do have the other maintainers standing behind me to help with other small fixes, all of the code reviews, all that stuff. Like, they've been extremely responsive at actually reviewing code, getting stuff in. So that's been great. But as far as like being able to spend the entire day working on the thing, it's just me. So that is less folks than on the Canonical side, but also have a lot less distractions and processes and company bullshit to deal with than they do. So I don't know, which one is the superior project. I wouldn't even try to guess, but we'll see, and we'll see where users move. We'll see where customers move. For anyone kind of wondering, I believe that Incus effectively has potentially more reliable, cheaper, more flexible support than LXD does. Like through my company, you can get support on Incus by buying prepaid support or by paying for things like help migrating or reviewing your infrastructure, that kind of stuff, which are all things that Canonical doesn't want to do. Canonical is generally not interested in customers that are going to be spending less than like $100,000 or something with them. And they're also not interested in any deal that is not a renewable deal. Like they only care about monthly renewable deals. Anything that's just like a one-off or that's just that kind of stuff, they're just not interested. It kind of makes sense from like a company budgeting planning type thing that you want to have things be predictable, and random like a bunch of hours here and there and consultation and stuff is not that. But for me, it works well, so I'm really happy to take on any of those kind of deals, which makes, I think, Incus a lot more compatible with small businesses, startups, and the like, because I get to offer like effectively the service and the help that they need, instead of just buy Ubuntu Pro and hope that first-line support at Canonical knows how to fix stuff for you when things break. So yeah, we'll see how things go. It's definitely unfortunate to see that stuff happening, but I think we've got bright days ahead of us on Incus. I'm super excited about a lot of the sponsored work and stuff I've got going on right now. Some of it has started to be merged already. There's a bunch more coming up. It's really good to get to actually work on this project and not spend all my day kind of doing company politics and that kind of stuff. So obviously the past day or so has been mostly politics for me, but that's definitely unusual. My normal day-to-day these days is actually getting stuff done, which I really enjoy. All right, so there are a few more questions. How's your one-to-one relationship with their engineers? Well, it used to be very good, and I think, like, personally, it's still going to be very good, but we're not going to be able to really talk about LXD or Incus anymore. So that's very unfortunate. Like, as I said, publicly it might look like Incus and LXD were competing. Behind the scenes, like, we were exchanging code, we were exchanging hints and bug fixes and links, and like, we were interacting. That is going to stop. And yeah, like, they're still my friends, and I still wish them all the best, but we're not gonna get to actually work together or do anything together anymore, and that's really sad. As far as I know, for the AGPL, like, they literally copy pasted exactly what they got from the lawyers, and they didn't have a say into the whole thing. I don't know how much protesting they did. I know that protesting at Canonical is usually kind of pointless, because at the end of the day, it's the top guy who just decides that something is going to need to happen, and it just happens. You need a lot of political capital and a lot of like knowing what ropes to pull and how to do things at Canonical to avoid those kind of stuff. And for LXD, well, that was what most of my job was protecting the team, protecting the project from a lot of things I saw as being potentially detrimental to it. With me gone, they don't really have that level of protection anymore. And so I'm very disappointed to see this change happen. I'm not surprised. Let's put it that way. Let's see. Info about Ubuntu fan removal. So I mean, on the Incus side, we removed it obviously because it's feature specific to the Ubuntu kernel. On an old install that you updated with LXD on it, I don't know why it would go away. I'm not aware of the Ubuntu kernel team removing it from their kernel, but maybe they did it and I just didn't notice. I don't know. I'm also building my own kernels anyway, so I wouldn't notice. Maybe make sure that you're actually on one of the official Ubuntu kernels. They're building so many different flavors for so many different cloud providers and whatever else these days that it's quite possible that some of their kernels don't have that particular patch set. So make sure you're running generic. That would be my recommendation there. That might get things working. On the Incus side, we're doubling down on Oven. It's not as magical and lightweight to put in place as the Ubuntu fan was, but Oven uses mainline Linux kernel features and is actually like, something you get on every single Linux distribution and kernel and something you can actually like test and count on. So we're spending more resources making that better in Incus right now, instead of relying on things like the Ubuntu fan. So there was something else. I think Canonical wants to publicly commercialize LXD or something because it's a lot of effort. LXD UI specifically looks like they're trying to compete with Proxmox. Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about that because a lot of that is stuff I pushed for and I did at Canonical. Proxmox is definitely what feels like a potential competitor, but they've never really cared that much. Proxmox is just not a user base that would bring in the kind of money that Canonical cares about. Canonical cares a lot more about VMware. That's where, and that's really where all of the microcloud, LXD UI, and all that stuff really fits in place, is as a replacement for small-scale VMware clusters. VMware with the Broadcom acquisition has increased licensing costs like crazy, and a lot of people are scrambling to find solutions there. So that's why we created, back when I was over there, we created MicroOven, MicroSelf, MicroCloud, started the work on the LXD UI. All that stuff is to effectively get to parity with the bits of VMware that matter. Now you can get the same with Incus. I don't know if you've noticed, but we recently actually added a rebranded version of the LXD UI to our 9 demo. So if you go and start a demo session here, you can just hit the try a web UI and you get into the web UI. So this is just a rebranded version of the LXD UI. So it's literally latest stable release from the LXD UI, which is an AGPLv3 project under the CLA. So we can't, I'm not going to contribute any fixes to it, but they can't prevent me from using it. So we've just taken it. We've got a local patch that does rebranding to turn it into the Incus UI, and a couple of small changes to remove things that are LXD specific from the wording and from how things work in there. But yeah, that's the UI that they've developed. I'm actually really happy with it. I think they've done a very, very good job at coming up with a great UI. And I wish it was more of an open source project that people could actually contribute to, But the team working on this has been doing an amazing job. They support a lot of the core features that are really needed. Integrates really nicely with the LXD, or in this case, Incus API, and things work really nicely. So just waiting for this thing to deploy, but yeah, you can get to go and just play with it directly. You can go terminal, you can do all that stuff. It works really well. I can actually show you the one running on my desktop machine here instead. Yeah, that's right. Let's just wave that one. Nope. Okay. Page not found. Probably need to log in. Let's do that again. Yeah. So in my case, I am using central authentication here through Keycloak. Let me just pick whichever one it is. It's this guy. Okay. One-time code. All right. So that's on my desktop machine here. And we can see like I've got Windows running. You can even do console, and here you go. Like you get your desktop, you get everything working really, really nicely. It's a great piece of work they've done. For VMs, you can attach ISO images directly. It's really well done. And I'm really happy that we just got to package it, and it's available as its own package for Incus. You can just install it and it works, and you can try it on our web demo. But yeah, they're effectively doing all of that to compete with VMware. That's mostly the play there. That can automatically cover the Proxmox trial as well, but as I said, like Proxmox users don't tend to be really into paying the amount of support and stuff that Canonical is looking at getting. VMware customers are a lot closer in that regard. Let's see. Next thing you could work on is an alternative to Landscape. Yeah, well, Landscape, that's been another interesting project at Canonical, with a lot of the team members having very good intentions for like where to bring the thing and really understanding where the value is, but then management just getting in the way constantly and keeping it like mostly unmaintained, quite expensive, and not doing much more than just checking package update status for security auditing. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate to see. There's a question around how can you easily upscale on Oven? Well, so if you look at the documentation for Incus, let's do doc and do networks, and let's go look at Oven network, setup Oven. So there's a guide for how to set it up just standalone on a single machine. So you can run through that, and it will just run on your own machine, not clustered or anything. If you go through that lets you at least get all of the fancy Oven features working, as far as like getting load balancers, ACLs, network peering, all that kind of stuff. So you can play with that. You can play with the Oven CLI to understand kind of how everything works without having to deal with like a multi-system deployment of Oven. If you need to do a bigger Oven cluster, there are Ansible playbooks that you can use to do that. Or otherwise, you could try and use Micro Oven, which is a project I created back at Canonical that makes that very easy. The problem with Micro Oven is its integration with Incus is a bit awkward because of the command line tools and where the files and stuff are. It's something I'm actually working on fixing, not because of Micro Oven itself, but just in general. Trying to get Incus to directly talk to the Oven database natively from Go instead of going through the CLI tools. Once that's fixed, it will make it much easier to actually use Micro Oven with Incus, because you won't need any of the command line tools or anything on your system. So that will be a nice change. VMware looks like. Yeah, I didn't actually see, like someone was mentioning thumbs down on the GPL change. Does that mean, like you mean on the pull request over there? I didn't actually look at that. Let me see. Because like I don't think anyone noticed that pull request really until I brought it up yesterday. So that would be this one. What does that look like? Yeah, I mean, I was kind of expecting it to be worse than that, to be honest. But yeah, so obviously that happened, and like my understanding is that the commit blurb and all the stuff in that pull request was like straight up from Canonical lawyers. Like the team didn't really have any say on any of that. But yeah, I didn't see the thumbs down, but yeah, not surprising to see that. Yeah, there's the mention from someone else in the chat, Joseph there, who's also building a UI for LXD and Incus. Yeah, considering that the LXD UI as it stands is mostly the work of one guy, David Adler at Canonical. I'm really amazed by how far they got and how quickly they got, despite having to deal with all of the canonical kind of bullshit, where like they have to use like specific look and feel and review process and constraints and stuff. Like it's not very easy for that team to get anything done. And they've done quite an amazing job in a very short amount of time. So I really like it. Obviously, it kind of annoys me that given its license and its CLA, like I can consume it, I can apply patches to it in our packages to do the rebranding and some fixes, but we can't contribute really anything there. Like I do file bugs and I do send some pointers and stuff, but I'm not going to be able to contribute to it myself, which is unfortunate. But it also provides with nice separation to an extent. Like my point of view is that we don't really want to work directly on a UI inside of the Incus project. We're very happy with the community developing a bunch of those options, and I'm very happy to package them. Like the way it's actually packaged directly here in the package repository that I make for Incus is it's specifically called Incus UI Canonical. So that we can easily have other UIs be packaged as well, and people can just pick whichever one they want and they just get installed on the system. Like it's really done that way on purpose so that it's easy to get more options. We don't want to get in the way of that. And yeah, just to show you here, we've got the patches I'm applying. So it's just the rebranding, so that's changing logo and stuff, a bit of CSS tweaks. Then navigation, we're effectively changing the links for where to access the doc, where to access where to file bugs, so that people don't file bugs against the LXD UI when they're using the rebranded one. Like I'd rather they file bugs against my repository, and then I decide what needs to go upstream. Changing the instructions for certificate generation, so it's mostly replacing all of the LXC commands with Incus commands, removing some external links, removing the canonical image servers. And that's it. Like that just applies kind of cleanly on new releases of the web UI, and that's been working well enough. All right, what else do we have? Any opinion on their big application when you apply for them? Well, yeah, I mean, I've got opinions on that. I mean, I was a engineering manager at Canonical, which meant that I was also hiring manager for a number of years over there, trying to get people on the team. And it's a disaster. I don't really know how else to put it. Like, it's extremely long. It makes it effectively like, occasionally you see layoffs in big companies and you're like, oh, we'd like so-and-so to join the team. It makes it impossible to hire any of those guys, because anyone who just got laid off is not going to be willing to wait 3 months to maybe get a job offer. Like that, it's just not how things work. So you get to mostly deal with candidates that are fresh out of school or still in school and looking for their first job. You get a bunch of those. You're also looking at folks who are quite happy where they are and they're just kind of shopping around. So that kind of works out for them. But they're really the only people who can go through like a 2 to 3 months long process. Some of the steps are also a bit ridiculous. Like I'm definitely not supportive of the psychometric test, which they're trying really hard to tell you this is not an IQ test, but that's about as close as you can get to an IQ test and try to pretend it's not one. It's really, really bad. And then based on those scores, a bunch of decisions are kind of made early on to reject some candidates with relatively little feedback. The interview process is quite good. I mean, I dislike the 7 or 8 different interviews for sure, but the general idea of like selecting people across multiple teams, across different roles is interesting and does give a good feel for what it is to work at Canonical to the applicant. That often means that the applicant decides not to come work at Canonical. That's the obvious downside of exposing them to that many people who tend to be reasonably frank about how things work in the business. But it's definitely interesting to see who goes through that process. I mean, then you've got the end of the process issues, and I think that's what a lot of people are complaining now, even more loudly than in the past, is if you're applying for anything that's management related, or if anything in the pipeline kind of has you flagged as, hey, this person may need extra attention, then often what happens is that you get to interview directly with Mark. And when you interview with Mark, he's got a very interesting approach to interviewing, let's put it that way. He does tend to focus on things that I don't think anyone else thinks matters. Things like, what have you been doing in high school? Did you do like any extracurricular activities? That kind of stuff. And it's a bit of a, it's really weird as an approach. I don't know that it actually gets him anything of value other than just kind of shaking candidates. But that's often used as a way to reject candidates. So I don't know. It's also an approach that doesn't really seem to work well for all geography. Like, anyone who grew up in Eastern Europe, they probably didn't have much as far as options for extracurricular activities to begin with. Same thing for anyone who grew up in poverty. Like, it's a way to kind of select for a specific demography without ever straight up selecting for that demography, I think, which is, that's very dubious as far as as a process, I think. But yeah, I think there's been enough notes from actual candidates going through this. You can go look at Glassdoor, Canonical on Glassdoor. You can go look at those Reddit and Hacker News posts on the whole process. And I'm yet to read anything that is a lie. Let's put it that way. So all of those horror stories and everything you've read, I'm not like reading through them. I can't necessarily figure out immediately who they are, but they don't seem wrong or exaggerated either. So there's definitely a lot of bad in that process. It's also true that if you get a engineering job on one of the more isolated teams at Canonical, so teams that don't have too much visibility straight up to the CEO and the like, it can be a very good environment to work in. The engineers are very good engineers, and I generally really enjoyed a lot of the people working there. Just do not apply for a management position in that company. You absolutely don't want that. And also don't go in there with hope that you're going to be able to kind of go up the ladder and eventually make it to like senior or manager, because those are not positions you're going to want. Like, if you're happy working on open source stuff, working on Ubuntu, working on things like that, and just keep doing that for years, then there might be a job for you there, if you can somehow make it through the process. If you've got any other like bigger aspiration and stuff, probably go look elsewhere. The other thing that might be worth mentioning, and I think that's been covered also on Reddit and others, is that you might feel like you're going through a very long process to then be offered what feels like a completely unsuitable salary. And that's definitely a thing. Like, over the past few years, the actual budget that they're willing to spend on a specific position has gone down significantly. And so the starter level type thing at Canonical is not particularly well paid. The current result is that it kind of skews the company towards hiring a lot more in Eastern Europe, some amount in South America, and generally like cheaper regions. Like, if you're based in North America and are used to, like a Bay Area type salary, there's no way you're going to get something useful from Canonical. And the same is true for anyone who lives like in a larger, bigger city with higher cost of living. That's probably not going to be a good option for you. But I've not done any hiring at Canonical since June-ish now, so I don't know the latest. I don't know if things have gotten better or gotten any worse. I've not read anything pointing to them getting any better, but who knows? Anyway, I think that's that on the hiring front. Let me see. There's some questions around can we change can I get the live streams a bit earlier? Yeah, I know it's not ideal for Europe. The problem is that I'm not very good at waking up in the morning. So we'll see. If I can maybe change some of the live streams to be between like 11 and noon here, that would move them to 5 to 6 p.m. in Europe. It's still a bit late, necessarily ideal for anyone, because they tend to go slightly over an hour, and that kind of gets you into end of day at work to dinner type territory as far as timing. Doing earlier than that is going to be a problem, because I do need to prepare in general for live streams, and I'm not very good at doing any work before 10 a.m. So if I need to start a live stream at 10 a.m. here, I'm going to have to be at work and preparing stuff at 9-ish, which is pretty unlikely. I could do middle of the night live streams. That would be easier for me. Except that I think my partner would probably kill me for the noise I'd be making in the house. But yeah, the kind of early afternoon-ish, I could probably move to an hour earlier easily enough. As I said, I could try to do 11 a.m. here, so around 5 p.m. Central Europe, to try and accommodate more people. In general, the live streams are not the most interactive thing, so I don't mind too much because they just get posted and people watch the recording afterwards. But for things like this one, like if I do another Q&A, I might try and do it earlier to help with Europe a bit. I think there's also the idea, and like we'll see if we do it in the next year or so. I would like to start doing kind of probably every week, but alternating. Like 1 week doing potentially like a Google Meet or something where users can come and just chat about any kind of issue they have or anything. Not recorded or anything, just like invitation, you fill a form, you get an invite type thing, and you can just join in. So I might do that like 1 week, and then the week after that we do more like developer and contributors for people working on the code to also to meet up, and just alternating 1 week to the next. There's been some like interest for that going on for sure. So I might try and roll that out earlier, like in the beginning of 2024. Otherwise, I think that's it. For anyone who's interested, I will be in person at FOSDEM this year. Gonna be running like a headless chicken because on Saturday I'm running the containers track all day, and on Sunday I'm running the kernel track all day. So I'm gonna be quite busy, but I will be in Brussels starting on Thursday morning, so I'm arriving a bit early. If anyone is in the area, wants to catch up, wants to say hi, that's gonna be definitely possible there. I know quite a few of the European users and developers do tend to go to FOSDEM. It is like the largest, pretty much the largest open source conference in the world as far as I'm concerned. Like it feels like 10,000 people or something on that campus. It's crazy. So I'll be there. A bunch of the Incus team will be there actually. We're gonna have Christian Brunner, Tycho Anderson will be there. We're gonna have Alex, who's one of the LXC contributors. There's going to be a bunch of folks who are going to be attending, some of them helping run things, some others just be there to attend. There's a question about what's the track on Sunday. Sunday is the Linux kernel track. So we've started doing that last year. We were doing kernel one day, then we're doing Linux kernel the other, and we're renewing that this year. From what I've seen, I think the containers track is getting the largest room at FOSDEM this year, at least the largest rooms for dev rooms. So that's going to be quite crazy. I think we've got a capacity of over 300 people in the room, so it would be nice. And for kernel, it's going to be a smaller room, but still expecting quite a few people to turn up. So yeah, that's going to be quite a crazy weekend, but I'm looking forward to catching up with a lot of folks over there in Brussels. And yeah, I mean, I've been rambling for about an hour and a half now, so it's probably time to wrap up. I'm also gonna have to kind of figure out. There's a question I mentioned just now about SRUV network videos with Incus. That's something else I need to see what we want to do. Right now, I've just stripped down all of the video links from the documentation because they were all pointing to LXD, and that content may not be up to date, and it's all talking about LXD and stuff. So I removed all that stuff. Now the question is going to be, do I want to actually go ahead and redo all of that? Because that took me years on the LXD side. Or do I want to try and do kind of broader videos, like do one on networking and try to just quickly cover SRIOV and some of that more advanced stuff at the same time? I don't really know yet, but that's something that was very valuable back in the LXD days that I think I'd want to get back on the Incus side. Currently, I'm mostly focusing on live streams to show feature development, and also doing the new releases videos. So that's kind of the main thing I'm doing. That kind of gives me a video a week, which is fine. But yeah, we're definitely going to want, I think, some more content showing potentially some of the more, well, a mix of things. Like I want to have videos covering the basics because people need to understand, what profiles are, how to create instances, how to do that kind of basic stuff. The documentation covers it, but it kind of makes sense to handle some of that. And then videos on the more advanced topics, whether it's like vGPU and like vGPU, oven, SIOV, those kind of like very interesting, very flashy type features. Like, I've got hardware in my home that I can do demos of like 100 gigabits networking. I've got an NVIDIA A100 that can do all of the fancy vGPU stuff. I can show those kind of things, which many people don't really have access to. So that's interesting to show on YouTube because it's the kind of thing that's currently out of reach of many, but it's just a matter of years before that stuff kind of shows up in many more places. So that could be interesting, kind of doing both, kind of covering the basics and covering the more advanced stuff, and the in between we just leave it to documentation because people can go and read that. I was also kind of wondering for a while, like whether to try and do any of those YouTube short stuff to kind of cover do the basic stuff of Incus as YouTube shorts. I'm not convinced I'm gonna do that. It's just, I don't like that format really. Like as a consumer, I really hate it. But I know some people kind of just live through that stuff. So I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, let me just check if there's anything else. Yeah, video about just the issues on OpenFGA. I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't want to diss the work that they've done. Like, I mean, they did have an engineer spend probably a couple of weeks implementing a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it was well thought through. It was just very lacking on like testing. The fact that it was never tested in a clustered environment, at least not in a meaningful way. That restarting the LXD daemon was never tested because it would just wipe it. That was a bit unfortunate. And the security aspect of like, if you block access to the server, then everything is allowed. That was also a massive oversight. I don't really want to go through the code and show like all the mistakes and all the stuff there. Like, it's, at the end of the day, it's code. People make mistakes. I make mistakes when I write code too. What matters is that it's been caught and it's been fixed now. And yeah, it's going to be funny to see what Canonical does with it, because now those fixes are not under their license of choice and are not under the CLA. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. And yeah, let's wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for everyone who's been watching. I mean, it's obviously been the most interactive of those live streams to date. Like, I don't know, we've had probably a dozen different people ask questions and interact there, on top of the kind of stuff I've seen coming from Twitter and Mastodon. So yeah, that was definitely a lot of fun. Also, for me, a lot easier to prepare in that I didn't have to prepare anything. I did get a couple of good bugs out of it that I'm going to be working on fixing. So that's going to be nice. And yeah, I think the next thing you can expect is probably going to be either a live stream next week on some feature I'm working on, or otherwise I'm going to be going straight into the 0.4 release and like its announcement and demo and stuff. Oh, there's a question, just I can answer that one about the try Incus code base, and yeah, it is all open source. So if you go look, there's a repo called Incus demo server, which has all of the code for that. You can build that stuff. It actually runs. You can run it self-contained on your own machine and play with it pretty easily. If you want the fancier client, which we use for the website, the entire code of the website is also open source here, so you can grab it from there instead. And yeah, that's all open source. I actually had a couple of companies reach out recently being like, hey, this is like a killer thing we want to use to demo our product. Can we, like, how did you do it? And just give them the link, and a couple of days later, they just tell me, yep, it works fine. Probably works a bit too well. Like, they didn't come and ask me to do it or asked for like paid support or consultation or anything. So I guess it's working well enough that it's easy for anyone to follow and get going. But yeah, that's all open source and you can try it there. Question around when is the next Q&A? I don't know. Probably not until after the holidays, but maybe mid-January-ish. I'm also gonna see kind of what happens, see if there's anything kind of newsworthy or anything that needs that might warrant a Q&A. But yeah, I would think kind of halfway through January would probably be good. Later January and stuff, I'm traveling to go to FOSDEM and the like. So if you've got questions, you can ask them in person there. I'm going to be traveling for 10 days or so during the holidays, so I'm not going to be doing anything around that time. So I think, yeah, until the holidays, it's going to be probably a live stream in the Incus 04 release, and that's probably going to be it for this year. And then pick up the rest in January, maybe start doing those weekly Google Meets and look at doing another Q&A like maybe halfway through the month. All right, well, thanks a lot for watching this. That was really a lot of fun to do. We'll see if it's as much fun for people to watch the recording of it. I think that's probably where it's going to be slightly less interesting than some of the other live streams, but we'll see. And yeah, see you in the next one, either in person or in live stream. If you've got any questions, go on our forum, ask questions there. You can also catch me on IRC or on social media. Like I'm pretty easy to find. And if you haven't yet, well, go try Incus. If you're still using LXD and you're not stuck on like a LXD LTS or something like that we don't currently cover with Incus, maybe consider switching over. And otherwise, well, I mean, you're going to be seeing more videos on this channel soon around that new release and more live streams. So thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day. See you all.